My husband took all the money from our joint account and ran away with his 20-year-old mistress, and I made him get the ending he deserved. My name is Nancy, and I am 38 years old. My husband had just divorced me by text message. The text came in while I was helping a customer decide between two silk blouses. I'm leaving you. Cynthia and I are moving to Miami. I've already emptied our joint account. I glanced at the screen, then back at the woman in front of me, who was debating between sky blue and soft peach. My hands didn't shake, my breath didn't hitch. The only sign that my husband of 12 years had just set fire to our marriage was the faint tightening around my eyes. I smiled at my customer, recommending the sky blue blouse to complement her complexion, and rang up her purchase with the same practiced ease as always. When she left, her shopping bag swinging at her side, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge what had just happened. Brian was gone. No explanation, no discussion. Just a cowardly text message, as if 12 years of marriage could be summed up in a single heartless sentence. I typed my response with the same composure I'd held in my boutique all day. Good luck. And then I put my phone down and locked up the shop for the night, just like I did every evening. Let him think he had won. The truth was, I had seen this coming. The late nights at work that didn't align with his pay stubs, the sudden need for privacy, the way he angled his phone away when texting, the new passcode he refused to share, the way he silenced his notifications as soon as I walked into the room. Brian was never good at hiding things. He thought he was. He assumed that because I didn't confront him outright, I didn't know. 3 months ago, I found the first undeniable proof, a receipt from an upscale steakhouse tucked into the pocket of his slacks as I sorted laundry. The date was burned into my memory, because that night he had told me he was working late. I stared at the receipt, my fingers tightening around the crisp paper. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, an extravagant dessert. A bill large enough to make me sick. He had lied to my face. I didn't confront him. Not then, not yet. Instead, I got to work. That same evening, I opened a separate bank account under my name. 1 week later, when Brian suggested we combine all our finances into one account for simplicity, I smiled, nodded, and pretended to agree, while quietly transferring my personal savings into the new account. The joint account he had just emptied, it only contained enough to keep up appearances, 2 months' worth of routine deposits. The rest was safely tucked away, just like the detailed records of his increasingly suspicious financial transactions. Brian thought he was being clever. He thought he was leaving me destitute. He had no idea he had just walked straight into my trap. Another text from him, "Don't bother begging. Cynthia and I leave tomorrow." "I'll send for my things later." Cynthia, the receptionist from his office. I met her at the company Christmas party last year, watched her giggle too loudly at Brian's jokes, the way her fingers brushed against his arm when she thought no one was looking. She was 20, maybe 21, younger than the marriage Brian had just walked away from. Back then, I had dismissed it. Brian was a middle-aged man stuck in a crisis of his own making. He had started going to the gym religiously, wearing shirts too tight for his softening stomach, using outdated slang that sounded ridiculous coming from a man pushing 45. I thought it was harmless. I thought he was just trying to reclaim his youth. Now, I realize he had been building his exit strategy for months. Too bad for him. So had I. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff I had been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. As I sat at my kitchen table, I sifted through my folder of evidence. Hotel receipts, charged to our shared credit card, expensive dinners that didn't include me. I had everything I needed. I picked up my phone, scrolling past Brian's unread messages, and dialed the number I had memorized. My lawyer answered on the first ring. "It's time," I said simply. She didn't need clarification. He made his move just now, via text message, no less. She let out a soft laugh. "Classy. I'll file the paperwork first thing tomorrow. Do you want me to have him served in Miami?" I took a slow sip of wine. No rush. Let him think he's won first. Brian thought he was leaving me broken. He thought I'd be crying, devastated, begging him to reconsider. Instead, I spent the evening making preparations. I reviewed my financial records, ensuring every dollar of my boutique's revenue remained separate from our shared finances. I double-checked the deed to the house, the home I had inherited from my grandmother, the one Brian had repeatedly suggested putting his name on. Thankfully, I had never been that naive. I printed screenshots of his text messages, his smug admissions of premeditated abandonment. My phone buzzed again. I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy. My little shop. The boutique I had built from the ground up. The one that generated more income than Brian's middle management job ever had. The one whose profits he had never been entitled to in the first place. I smiled as I imagined him in Miami, basking in his short-lived victory, completely unaware of the certified letters that would be waiting for him soon. I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms overhead as I savored the quiet triumph of a plan falling into place. Then I picked up my phone, dialed the credit card company, and waited for the automated prompts. "Mrs. Harper speaking. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately." The woman on the other end was polite and professional. "Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the charges?" "Yes," I said smoothly, glancing at the printed receipts on my table. 2 first-class tickets to Miami, booked today. A luxury hotel reservation at the Royal Palm, and I'll need to remove my husband as an authorized user on this account. "Do you have documentation of the fraud?" I almost laughed. "I have text messages from him admitting it outright. I'd be happy to forward them to you." The representative's tone shifted, still professional, but now tinged with satisfaction. "Consider it handled." By tomorrow morning, Brian and Cynthia would arrive at the airport, only to discover their tickets had been canceled. Their luxury hotel no longer booked, their dream of a lavish Miami getaway shattered before it even began. As for me, I finished my glass of wine, turned off my phone, and went to bed early because, unlike Brian, I had a thriving business to run in the morning, and this was only the beginning. The next text came in as I was sipping my morning coffee, the rich aroma curling into the air like a quiet reminder that I was in control of my life. The words on my screen, however, were anything but pleasant. "Your little shop will probably keep you busy. You're not young anymore." I set my mug down slowly, relishing the warmth of the ceramic against my fingers. My little shop. The same boutique that turned a profit within its first year. The same business that grew beyond Brian's salary long before he even noticed. The same empire he had sneered at while I carefully expanded my customer base, negotiated better vendor deals, and cultivated a brand that women loved. He had always mocked my ambition, called my business a hobby, even as it started paying for our vacations, our dinners, and, ironically, his ridiculous gym memberships and new designer shirts. And now, standing in some terminal with Cynthia clinging to his arm, he really thought I'd be shattered, left with nothing but my little shop to keep me occupied. I laughed, a short, dry chuckle. Brian had no idea just how much he had underestimated me. I didn't waste time. First, I called my lawyer. "It's done," I said, my voice level and steady. "File the papers." She didn't need an explanation. We had been waiting for this moment for weeks. "Want me to have him served at his hotel in Miami?" she asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. I considered it, then shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, send them to his mother's house." Silence, then a low chuckle. "Ouch, that's cold." "So is walking out on your wife through a text message," I reminded her. "Point taken. I'll make sure the paperwork is ready today." Next, I pulled up my bank's app, checking the balance in my personal account. Safe, untouched, every dollar I had worked for protected. Then I logged into our joint credit card. Brian had booked their Miami escape with our card, probably assuming I'd be too slow to stop him. A rookie mistake. I dialed the credit card company, waiting through the automated prompts until a customer service rep picked up. "Mrs. Harper, how can we assist you today?" I kept my voice pleasant. "I'd like to report fraudulent charges." "Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the transactions?" I didn't even have to check my records. 2 first-class tickets to Miami, booked today, a reservation at the Royal Palm Hotel, and while you're at it, I need to remove an authorized user, my soon-to-be ex-husband. A pause. "Do you have documentation that these charges were unauthorized?" I smiled, glancing at my phone screen, at Brian's smug little message sitting there like an admission of guilt. "I have text messages from my husband outright stating that he drained our account and used our joint card to book a trip with his mistress. Would you like me to forward them?" The woman on the other end let out a soft, knowing sigh. "That won't be necessary. Those charges will be reversed and the card has been canceled. Anything else I can do for you?" I thought for a second. "Yeah, can you make sure an alert is put on my account so that he can't open another one under my name?" "Already done, ma'am. And I have to say, good for you." I smirked. "Thanks." I closed my laptop and leaned back, letting out a slow breath. Brian and Cynthia had no idea what was waiting for them at the airport. I could picture it, the two of them strolling up to the counter, their overstuffed suitcases dragging behind them. Cynthia giggling, wearing some overpriced outfit Brian probably bought her with our money. Brian standing taller than usual, puffed up with the confidence of a man who thought he had won, and then reality. The agent shaking her head. "I'm sorry, sir, but these tickets have been canceled. Their reservation at the Royal Palm, gone. Their dream of a smooth, luxurious escape, destroyed before it even began, and soon the panic would set in. It didn't take long. By 11:07 a.m., my phone started buzzing. I let it ring. Then it buzzed again, and again, and again. I glanced down, Brian's name. Then the texts started rolling in. "What the F did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. The hotel canceled our reservation. Fix this, Nancy." I smirked, setting my phone aside, folding some new scarves for the boutique's display window. Let him stew. A few minutes later, another text. "You spiteful bee. You have no right to do this." No right? Brian had abandoned me through a text message? Brian had drained our account without warning. Brian had cheated on me for months and laughed about it, and yet somehow I was the problem. I rolled my eyes. Classic. Then another text. Desperate now. "Nancy, be reasonable. We need that money for the trip. We can work something out." Oh, he's backpedaling now? I let his messages pile up for another hour, watching the shift in tone. First it was anger, then entitlement, then pleading. "Come on, Nance. You don't have to be like this. I know you're hurt, but we had something good once." Wow, the audacity. Then, my favorite. "We can be civil about this." Civil. From the man who had just called me a bee? I laughed under my breath. I opened my phone, scrolled to Brian's name, and pressed block. The screen went blank. The buzzing stopped. For the first time in years, I felt a kind of freedom I hadn't known I was missing. Brian could scream into the void all he wanted. He had chosen this. He had played the game, he just never expected me to be 10 steps ahead. And now? Now the only person left to deal with his mess was Cynthia. Something told me she wouldn't last long. The first phone call came 2 days after I blocked Brian's number. It was his mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the text. "Nancy, we need to talk. Brian told me everything. I can't believe you're being this vindictive. Call me back immediately." I snorted. Vindictive? Brian had left me via text. Brian had drained our joint account. Brian had used our credit card to fund his little romantic getaway. And now I was the bad guy? I didn't reply. Instead, I sat back with my coffee, waiting for the next move. Over the next 24 hours, I got the full report from mutual friends. Brian had gone into full damage control mode. He told his mother that I was a cold, controlling wife who had pushed him away. He told his sister Karen that I had been spiteful for years, making his life miserable. He told anyone who would listen that I was ruining his life out of revenge. But Brian had one problem. He forgot that I had receipts. When his mother called again, I picked up. "Nancy, Did he tell you he emptied our joint account before running off to Miami?" I cut in smoothly. Silence. Then a hesitant, "Well, he said you weren't supportive and he needed a fresh start." I smirked, reaching for my laptop. "Do you want me to read you the text where he brags about it, or the one where he tells me I'm too old and should focus on my little shop?" More silence. Then, "That doesn't sound like Brian." "Oh, but it is," I said sweetly, already forwarding the screenshots. "Check your messages." A few minutes later, my phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked the transcript, it was short. I didn't know. "I need to talk to him." I smiled. Checkmate. When we finally walked into court, Brian was still playing the victim. He wore his best suit, one I had bought for him years ago, and tried to look humble. His lawyer, a man who looked like he had rushed through a Craigslist hiring process, stood stiffly beside him. My lawyer? She looked relaxed, confident, ready. We weren't here to argue, we were here to bury him. "Your Honor," my lawyer began, her voice crisp, "we have irrefutable evidence that Mr. Harper engaged in financial misconduct, deliberately draining shared assets for personal use while abandoning the marriage without notice." She handed over the printed text messages. Brian's own words, boasting about his little stunt. Brian shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Harper, do you deny that you withdrew all shared funds and used joint credit for personal travel? Brian cleared his throat. I just wanted a fresh start. By committing financial fraud? The courtroom was dead silent. My lawyer continued methodically, laying out every carefully documented detail, the hotel charges, credit card abuse, the way he had hidden money for months, thinking I wouldn't notice. Then she dropped the final bomb. Your Honor, the boutique that Mr. Harper is attempting to claim partial ownership of was established as a separate entity before the marriage. The financial records show that Mrs. Harper maintained strict separation of business and personal funds. Mr. Harper has never contributed to or invested in the business. He supported me emotionally. Brian interjected desperately. That has to count for something. The judge didn't even blink. You called it her little shop in multiple text messages belittling her business. Do you have any proof that you contributed financially? Brian opened his mouth, then I closed it. I folded my hands in my lap, watching as reality sank in. In the end, the ruling was brutal. I kept the house, the one I had inherited, the one Brian had tried to get me to put in his name. I kept the boutique. Brian's claims to half were dismissed outright. I kept my personal assets. My lawyer had frozen the remainder of our accounts just in time. Brian, he got a mountain of debt from his credit card charges. He got his car, which was worth less than what he still owed on it. He was humiliated. And then, for the final cherry on top, the judge ordered Mr. Harper is to return the withdrawn funds within 24 hours. Failure to do so will result in further legal action. Brian went pale. That money is gone. The judge didn't care. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it. As I walked out of the courtroom, my heels clicking sharply against the tile, I could hear Karen's voice behind me. Brian, what the hell were you thinking? She had seen the evidence now, she had watched him crumble, and suddenly the rumors she had spread didn't hold up. I kept walking. Outside, I took a deep breath, tilting my face toward the sun. For the first time in years, I felt light. Brian had thought he was writing the ending to my story. Instead, he had just set me up for a better beginning. I found out about Cynthia leaving Brian before he did. At first, it was subtle. Her Instagram feed, once filled with poolside cocktails and selfies in designer sunglasses, started shifting. Gone were the pictures of her clinging to Brian's arm, replaced with vague, passive-aggressive quotes. Some men promise the world and deliver nothing. Know your worth and walk away. You can't build a future with someone who's stuck in their past. It didn't take a genius to put the pieces together, and then one night, her relationship status quietly changed from in a relationship to single. No dramatic announcement, no messy post, just a silent retreat. Brian had been dumped. And I was thriving. I could picture the scene perfectly. Brian sitting in some dingy apartment, or more likely his childhood bedroom, scrolling through Cynthia's profile in disbelief. Refreshing, rereading, trying to convince himself that this was just a phase, that she'd come back once she realized how much she needed him. Except she wouldn't. Because Cynthia had finally realized what I had figured out years ago. Brian wasn't a man with ambition. Brian wasn't a man with potential. Brian was a man who thought charm was a substitute for effort. And Cynthia, bless her heart, had learned the hard way that charm doesn't pay the rent. She had thought she was getting an experienced, successful older man. Instead, she got a broke, washed-up guy with a midlife crisis and no real plan. And now she was moving on. Cynthia wasn't the only one Brian had fooled. Apparently, his company had already been watching him. Word got around that HR had started an internal investigation before he even set foot in the courtroom. Because, as it turned out, a mid-level manager sleeping with a 20-year-old receptionist wasn't exactly the kind of corporate leadership they wanted, especially when other women started talking. A few offhanded comments in the break room turned into official complaints. And Brian, who once strutted through the office like he owned the place, suddenly found himself in very hot water. I heard he tried to play the victim, tried to claim it was just company politics, tried to act outraged when he was pushed out quietly. But the truth? He wasn't valuable enough to be worth the headache. And just like that, his career was over. Without a job, without Cynthia, and with a maxed out credit card from his Miami meltdown, Brian had very few options left. At 45 years old, he had to do something he had mocked others for doing. He had to move back in with his mother. I didn't find out through him, of course. I found out through mutual acquaintances, through whispers from people who had once defended him. He's been sleeping in his childhood bedroom. He says it's temporary, but his mom already looks exhausted. I ran into him at the grocery store. He looked rough. I could picture it. Brian, bitter, resentful, trapped in the very life he thought he had escaped, lying to himself, lying to everyone, telling his mom that this was just a temporary setback, that he was figuring things out. But everyone knew the truth. He wasn't figuring anything out. He was simply sinking. While Brian was stuck, I was building something bigger than ever. My boutique, which he once mocked as a little shop, had turned into a powerhouse. Women came in not just to shop, but to support me. I heard what happened. You're an inspiration. My ex tried the same thing. I wish I'd been as smart as you. Honestly, I came in to buy something just to spite him. Sales soared, profits doubled, and then one day a friend made an offhand comment, "You should open another store." I laughed at first. Then I thought about it. Then I made it happen. What started as a small boutique turned into a brand. I hired more staff, expanded my inventory. I was invited to speak at women's business panels, sharing my story, not as a scorned wife, but as a businesswoman who had played her cards right. I was moving forward, and Brian, he was stuck in the past. It took a while, but eventually, Brian's own family turned their backs on him. Karen, his sister, who had once spread his sob story like gospel, showed up at my store one afternoon. She hesitated, glancing around like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. I raised an eyebrow. "Something I can help you with?" She sighed. "We were wrong to believe him." I waited. We saw the texts, the bank records, the credit card statements. We saw the way he talked about you. I nodded. "And?" Karen shook her head, frustration in her voice. He's not who I thought he was." I let that sit between us. Then, after a pause, I said, "You figured that out faster than your mother did." Karen winced. "Yeah, about that." She hesitated, then finally admitted, "She's done with him too." I blinked. "Excuse me," Karen folded her arms. "She told him he's got 3 months to get out." I laughed. 3 months? "That's generous," Karen shrugged. "She's tired of his excuses. He complains all day, won't get a job, says he's above working retail or waiting tables. She finally told him, 'I raised you better than this, and I'm done raising you now.'" I grinned. Took her long enough. Brian thought he had won when he left me, thought he was trading up, thought he was escaping to a better life, but now he had no job, he had no money, he had no girlfriend, and soon he wouldn't even have a place to live. Meanwhile, I had everything I had ever worked for. Brian once joked that my boutique was just something to keep me busy. Now it was a multi-location business. Now it was a legacy. Now it was proof that I had won. And the best part, Brian knew it too. A year after Brian walked out of my life, I stood in the middle of my third store, surrounded by success, surrounded by everything I had built without him. The grand opening had been a massive event. Lines wrapped around the block, customers eagerly waiting to step inside. The boutique was sleek, sophisticated, mine. The direct result of my hard work, my intelligence, my planning. I glanced up at the sign above the door, the one that bore my name, and let out a slow, satisfied breath. Brian used to mock my business, calling it my little shop, and now that little shop had turned into an empire. And Brian, he had nothing. When my lawyer called, I already knew it would be about him. "Guess who just filed a lawsuit against you?" I didn't even blink. "Let me guess. Brian?" She let out a dry laugh. "Yep, he's claiming partial ownership of the boutique." I actually laughed. A full, genuine laugh. "Ownership of what?" "Well, according to him, because you expanded while you were married, he's entitled to a share of the business." I shook my head, grinning. "Oh, this is going to be fun." Brian walked into court looking worse than before. His once proud stance had slumped. His cheap suit looked like it had been pulled from the back of his closet. He barely glanced at me. His lawyer, probably hired at a discount, stood stiffly beside him. I barely had to say a word. My attorney demolished him with ease. "Mr. Harper has no financial ties to this business." Mr. Harper did not invest in or contribute to this business in any way. The boutique was incorporated in Mrs. Harper's name long before the marriage. Then, for the final blow, she handed over printed copies of his own texts. "Your little shop will keep you busy. That's just your hobby." The judge read them, then leveled a flat look at Brian. Mr. Harper, are you claiming ownership of a business you once dismissed as a hobby? Brian stammered. I supported her emotionally. The judge barely contained a sigh. Petition denied. Just like that, his last grasp at my success was over. He had played his final card, and he had lost. A month later, Cynthia walked into my store. I spotted her immediately, standing at the entrance like she wasn't sure if she should be there. She hesitated, then finally stepped forward. Nancy, she swallowed, looking younger than ever, like she had aged in the past year. I owe you an apology. I tilted my head, waiting. She took a deep breath. I believed him. I thought he was just escaping a bad marriage, but she looked down, gripping the strap of her purse like it was her only anchor. He wasn't escaping, was he? She said softly. He was just running away. I smiled. You figured that out, huh? Cynthia exhaled, shaking her head. Yeah, I figured that out real fast. I didn't feel anger toward her. I didn't feel anything. She had been young, naive, and she had learned the hard way that Brian was never looking for a new beginning. He was just a man who ran when things got tough, and he would keep running, over and over, until there was nowhere left to go. Cynthia lingered for a moment, like she wanted me to say something more. I didn't. Instead, I turned back toward my display table, running my fingers over the edge of a handbag collection that was selling out nationwide. Cynthia nodded almost to herself, then quietly left. She had already disappeared from my mind before she even reached the door. I heard the final details about Brian's downfall through mutual acquaintances. He had burned every bridge, no job, no girlfriend, no family support. His mother had finally kicked him out, forcing him to find a tiny rental apartment with 2 other men in their 40s, men who had also screwed up their lives and had nowhere else to go. He had tried dating again, but apparently women weren't exactly lining up for a middle-aged man with no job, no money, and a history of failed relationships. He still tells people he's just rebuilding his life, one acquaintance told me, rolling her eyes. But we all knew the truth. Brian wasn't rebuilding anything. He was waiting for some miracle, for some handout, for someone to fix his mistakes for him. And no one was coming. I once thought revenge meant getting even, that it meant watching him suffer, but now I knew true revenge was success. It was standing in my 3rd store, holding the keys to my own empire, while Brian sat in some miserable apartment wondering where it all went wrong. It was knowing that I didn't just survive, I thrived. It was realizing that his betrayal didn't break me, it made me stronger. I smiled to myself as I walked through my boutique, my heels clicking against the marble floors, my employees greeting me with excitement. Brian was stuck in the past. And I was building the future. The best revenge is success, and Nancy had never been more victorious. What do you think about this story? Leave your thought in the comments.